evening, everyone. Last session of the day. Always, a challenge for us to keep you all awake and interested. So hopefully we'll live up to that. So as Publishing Next aims to be in the vanguard of publishing, the idea of this panel is to look a bit ahead beyond just the past and the present of publishing. So we hope to look at some of the things that are playing out today, even as we are looking at what's happening in our daily lives. There are other things that are playing out today, which are very much visible but not being seen. And when we think of publishing today, it's largely text and images, right? How many of you, when you think of publishing, think of anything else? Anyone? So almost everybody. Okay, there's one hand that went up there, but he's on the panel, so I will not count him in. So, okay, so that's another reason that somebody's saying. But there's more to that. And with a huge number of people, young people in India today, 50% of Indians are under the age of 25, right? The publishing industry is talking about a huge opportunity ahead when all of these people turn readers. But on the other hand, there are some discordant notes that are also being heard. How many of you have heard of the Usher Report? Okay, that's only 2, 3. So I think I should talk a bit about that. How many of you know of Pratham? More hands. Okay. So Pratham, apart from being a publisher, does something else, which is a very interesting, part of Pratham. They conduct an annual status of education survey and come out with a report at the end of each year. So they go to children's homes in villages. It's a survey largely in rural India, and ask them a bunch of questions to figure out what do children really know at whatever class or age they are at that point of time in that year. And over the past many years, I think they've been doing this almost over the last 10 plus years. Their Usher reports, which they come out with in January every year, seem to indicate that the education system is failing us badly. The reports indicate that of all the children enrolled in class 5, only about 50% are able to read a simple text at class 2 level. So you can imagine what the child would be doing in school, sitting there in class 5, not being able to read a class 2 text, but moving on from year to year to class 6, class 7, and so on. Now, are these people really going to be able to read? So that's a big question there. Now, contrast the difficulty that children and even many adults have today in reading beyond some of the lighter stuff like newspapers and magazines, with their penchant for listening to stuff on their smartphones and MP3 players, or viewing stuff on their smartphones and tablets. Now, reading is not so much an existing habit today amongst not just kids, even adults, but listening and viewing most certainly is. And, in fact, I don't know if many of you have come across this. When you ask children, about anything and they want to learn something new, what would you do if you had to learn something new? You didn't know something and you wanted to find out something about it. You would go to Google, right? Children don't go to Google. You know what their first stop would be? YouTube. So they don't want to read stuff and understand. They want to have somebody speak it out to them, listen to them, and watch it and learn. Okay, so that's a habit that they are developing, even as we speak, something that's visible but not really being seen. And so the chances of actually connecting with people, with children especially, by riding on a habit that they have rather than on trying to inculcate a habit which they don't have and you have to fight a huge battle on that might be easier to ride on a habit they have. So maybe audio and video may be a more effective medium for not just entertainment, but for infotainment and access to knowledge of this serious and scholarly variety as well. Now, with widespread 4G access coming very soon, already happening in various places, but will be across the country within about another year or so, and smartphones and very cheap smartphones and tablets in everyone's hands. We'll have some very interesting experiences from some of the panelists on what they have observed there. And so the challenge of being able to actually get content, audio and video content, to people who can consume them is not going to be as difficult as the challenge of getting printed books into the hands of readers. And there are also platforms like YouTube, SoundCloud, and podcasting platforms, and many other interesting experiments that are being tried out, which are making the distribution, the marketing, the monetization of audio and video much easier. And there's also been a democratization of audio-video content creation, thanks to cheap and good audio-video recorders, free audio-video software, which is pretty good, software. And software that allows one to pull together text, images, audio, and video together to create interesting learning environments is also something that's getting better and better. The one thing that's still open today is, I would say, monetization of all of this. YouTube monetization is happening, so we'll hear from Nikhil on that. He'll have a lot to say on that. But that's still a bit open, so there are various experiments being tried out, and over time, we'll be able to figure something out, I expect. Now, just a quick, question to try and figure out the background of the audience when it comes to audio and video. So, how many of you have watched a video that isn't a movie? Yeah. So, almost everybody has watched videos, right? How many of you have listened to audio that isn't music? So, all of you. So, audio video is a habit here too. How many of you have created videos? Again, everybody, right? Almost everybody. You haven't taken a video on your smartphone of anything? That still counts as creating video. And how many of you have created audio recordings of anything? Again. So, just this audience itself gives you an indication of the fact that we do it all the time. We don't realize that we're doing something, but it's happening. And if you look at some of the podcasts that have really broken ground, there was a podcast in the US called Serial, which I think was a turning point for podcasting, the podcasting boom to take off. It's a serialized, episodic, retelling of a murder investigation, and it was done over 10 episodes or so. And overall, there were 40 million downloads. And I don't think the same person would download it again, so it's pretty much 40 million listeners, I would say, there. And more recently, if you look at, I don't know how many of you have seen this video, there was a rap video about the Unilever factory in Kodaikanal. How many of you have seen that? Okay, so quite a few. And that's got 3+ million viewings already. Okay. Yeah, the net neutrality video as well. I didn't check the number on that. So that's another excellent example of, the ability to communicate something. I mean, imagine how difficult it would have been to communicate what you did in that video through text, and getting so many people to actually read that and so on. 3 million views. Okay, so there you go.
So both Kiran and I are also with the net neutrality campaign.
Okay, we'll come to that. Yeah. Okay. So we have a panel of experts who've been following what's happening in publishing beyond just text. So, and also in many active cases, actively creating and distributing content in audio and video. Okay, so let me just quickly introduce them. I will just say a brief word or two about them. You can refer to the booklet you have with you for more details. On my left is Indrajit Gupta. He's a business journalist and editor with over 2 decades of experience. So his last assignment was as the founding editor of the Indian edition of Forbes magazine. And now his next big, hairy, audacious goal, as he says, is to disrupt the digital media and learning space. So he's founded a new company called Founding Fuel, and they're working hard to give shape to a new venture that's built around a big idea of entrepreneurship, which they believe has the potential to transform India over the next 10 years. And on my right, the second from my second from me on my right is Osama Manzar. He's a global leader on the mission of eradicating information poverty from India and global south using digital tools. He's a social entrepreneur, author, columnist, and sits on several government and policy committees in India, and working on international organizations working in the areas of the internet and digital divide. He also runs the Digital Empowerment Foundation, which has a presence across 150 locations in India. On my immediate right is Jyoti Narula Ranjan. She's probably no stranger to about half of you, but for the rest I'll just quickly introduce her. She gave an excellent presentation about podcasting just about an hour ago. So she's founder of SynTalk, short for Synthesis Talk. It's a freewheeling disciplinary talk show with a philosophical approach to understanding the world from a long-term perspective. And she will have more to say on that when she speaks, I'm sure. And on my far left is Titash Nyogi. So he's an entrepreneur. He has built 2 products, Themify and bookmachine.co. And in both cases, he has worked across the product stack from the front end to the back end. And he has a deep understanding of how to build web and mobile products for the content-driven consumer space. So we hope to hear more from him on his expertise. And on my far right is Nikhil Pawa, who's the founder, editor, and publisher of Medianama, the leading publication for news and analysis on the evolving digital ecosystem in India. Okay, so with that, let's get started. Okay, I'll start by first asking Indrajit to tell us a bit about what he's doing right now at Founding Fuel. So you started it styling yourself as a multimedia platform from day one, and you're using audio podcasts, video hangouts, apart from, of course, text for articles and columns. So who are you targeting, and did the choice of who you're targeting dictate the media that you're choosing to use, and how does technology impact the way you're creating content across media?
Thanks, Satya. So very, very quickly, Founding Fuel is, as Satya mentioned, both an integrated media and a learning platform, which is very clear about the fact that we're not trying to be everything to everyone. So we've taken a decision that we'd be sharply focused on a community, and the way that we've defined that community is we scan the environment to see what is that one big idea that will in some ways be transformational from a business and from a standpoint of India as well as a country. And we felt that entrepreneurship was that kind of, it had the legs as a big idea to really do that. The only difference is, and there are many platforms in that space, is that we defined entrepreneurship a little differently. The two points of major difference. One was that a lot of the media mainstream conversations around entrepreneurship have tended to focus around starting up. We're not obsessed about starting up. We're saying entrepreneurship as a concept is much, much wider and bigger. It encompasses both large and small enterprises. Large enterprises need to be entrepreneurial. Small ones need to learn how to manage scale. Also, I think the whole difference between entrepreneurs and professionals, I believe, is also going to start blurring. Professionals will need to be entrepreneurial. Entrepreneurs will need to be professional. So we're in some ways not trying to, I think, ghettoize. We're trying to unify markets. And I think what will hold this together, the community, as we're thinking about, is the whole entrepreneurial mindset. Having said that, I think the reason why we need to think about multimedia in today's context, and in fact, to stay relevant in tomorrow's world, is very, very clearly the fact that the center of gravity in a market like India has shifted to somewhere in that age bracket of about 25 to 30. So if you look at more closely what that generation is going through, they are not reading, unfortunately. And I've been a print journalist for over 2 decades, and that's horrifying and tragic for me, but we've got to find interesting ways of dealing with it. If we ignore that entire phenomena, then I think we will not have the kind of impact that we wanted to build. So one is that it's a necessity now. It's no longer something that is good to do. you've got to start thinking about multimedia. Now, the big issue really for us was how do we embed those capabilities? It's all good to say that. So one is that we were clear about the purpose of who we are and what we stand for. And how do you take and create premium content, both on the media side and the learning side. As we go along, we can discuss that, but more specifically on the media side, how do we do that in a way that engages, is insightful, is something that will help keep this community from coming back. One of the things we wanted to avoid was to not get into this treadmill of, kind of building millions and millions of page views in the hope that we'll get some salvation on digital advertising. I don't think that's the predominant model here. But in terms of creating multimedia content, I think the big issue and the elephant in the room is around capabilities. How do today's newsrooms, publishing houses really build that capability in-house? And I think we took a fairly early call that as a startup, we didn't have the resources to do that all by ourselves. And it made ample sense to start looking at partnering. Partnering with a view to find partners who have the same values, mission, understand what we're trying to do. So our partnership with Ping Network, which is a venture founded by Govind Ethiraj, who's a well-known editor and journalist for many decades, and a couple of his founders. We partnered with them because they bring serious understanding of digital television, or digital video, if you'd like to call it that. And they have essentially helped us take a lot of that headache away from understanding editing, understanding production, understanding how digital audiences need to be built and how do you cater to them, find interesting, innovative, creative formats that can break through the clutter. Because it's not enough to just produce video. Someone has to watch it at the end of the day. And it better be distinctive, and it better be things that you want to come back to. So we're very clear that we want to create shows much like a television channel would do, but obviously catered and tailored for digital audiences of today, right? Much the same on podcasts as well. We took a decision to partner with a studio, much like Jyoti told us about her experience in Bombay. We partnered with a studio in Bangalore, a couple who wanted to kind of focus on podcasting as their core business. The guy comes with many years of experience in sound engineering. He owns a studio. They've done so for us to essentially very quickly cut the learning cycle. It made sense to bring these guys on board because they knew what they were doing. They were very, very accomplished. I think what we needed to do at our end was be very clear about the kind of formats that we could attempt, which would again build viewership or followership in this case, and that's worked out. So the Ping partnership has yielded video shows that we've now done, for which there is a following that builds up when you promote it on social media. We started doing a fortnightly hangout on big issues, which is, to my mind, television quality. It's HD quality recording. It's produced very, very slickly. There are technical checks done 2 days before. There are briefing notes that go out to all the participants at least 3-4 days earlier, so they know exactly what are the issues that are going to be discussed. So those are the things that from our end as content producers we've got to do, right? Now that sets us apart from other platforms because in some ways the quality parameters are kind of taken care of, the production values. Because in today's world, it's not enough to just kind of produce audio and video. How do you kind of ensure that the shows are conceptualized well, they have a clear theme, and they're consistent in terms of delivery and quality. So those were, I think, important.
One other question that I had for you is, are you looking at primarily the English audience or also the Indian language audience in the Indian context?
To start with, for most part, we've kind of focused on English, but we certainly would want to look at that. I've spoken to, and one of the reasons for coming here is also to try and learn about what we could do to expand this, because the whole mission of Founding Fuel is to try and democratize the kind of content that we're creating, both on the media side and learning side. And it can't be accomplished by appealing to a very small slice of our population. But there are practical issues. Now, how do you do it in a way that is sustainable? I think that's a big issue. But there's a huge opportunity one can understand from the presentation we heard on News Hunt, clearly. But the issue is, how do we make that happen? How do we produce content that can be hopefully translated, shared? We have a content syndication arrangement with Mint. We would love to have it with other regional publications as well. The issue is they have to see merit in what we're producing, so we've got to understand their audience. I'm not sure that what we produce for a certain set of audience would necessarily fit everyone, but there are enough, I think, there that there are common ground. So,
I'd like to lead from there. Primarily, English and urban audience that they're targeting right at this point of time, though they want to expand to other audiences too, to Osama, who's been working in the rural areas across the country. And it would be interesting to hear from you on both the demand side and supply side in terms of what are the things that rural audiences look for in terms of information or knowledge. So what are the things they're looking for on the demand side, and what's available to them? And should supply lead demand, or is it the other way around? What are the issues there?
Thanks. So just to give you a universe, our rural India, talk of any medium, more so for digital and even for the print. Since we are talking about future of publishing and information dissemination and all that, and even though we talk about mobile is 900 million plus penetration, just to give you a background that 72% of Indian women do not have access to any mode of communication or information, including mobile. This is hard data. Even though we have 900 million penetration of mobile, about 60% of, or about 60 to 70%, somewhere in between, rural population do not have access to any medium of communication. However, just to give you an example why it is like that is because Calcutta has got 400% mobile penetration, whereas West Bengal has got 28% mobile penetration. So, and when I say mobile penetration, I'm talking about the telcos talk about SIM sold. They usually sell 4 SIM to me, and not even 1 SIM to my wife. So, the situation is like that. Having said that, I want to bring to notice that the way we work and the way our experience is, that we have been a kind of population where print as a medium has been the only source of information, and on the basis of that we have discarded entire knowledge bank, which from the people who never used to read or write. So we have literally published, may have published for the masses, but we never had a situation of being published by the masses. So we are certainly going from an era from publishing for the masses to publish by the masses, which is perhaps from the British era to Gandhian era, where Gandhi always wanted the cloth to be made by the masses rather than made for the masses. So content is like that. And so having said that, our target, the way we work in rural areas is that we believe that all the poverty, deprivation, exploitation is because of the lack of information. They don't have a means to disseminate, they don't have means to access information. When I say information, read everything, from market prices to publishing to newspaper to anything and everything. They don't have access, and that is what made us excited about how we bridge that gap of information so that they take their own decision. They access at least their rights, if not their privileges. They don't even access their rights.
How many people would be literate there? What percentage of the audience?
Everybody is literate. They are highly educated. We are illiterate.
No,
So,
illiterate in the sense of being able to
they
read.
are oral literate.
Okay.
They are orally extremely knowledgeable and literate. So we that also you made me a little jerky at the moment. That we need to redefine our literacy at this era. That who is literate and who is not literate, because literacy has a subject to the medium. Literacy is not subject to the knowledge that the person has. And that has really made the entire big population non-contributing to the decision making. So the most exciting part is that technology has become natural. The nature has not become technological. And what I mean is that the technology, which is the pencil and pen, which used to be a technology which deprived people, has converted into a technology which has become oral, and oral is the natural technology of a person or a human being. We were born with oral technology. And now audio, video, images, photography is all oral technology. It's all oral medium. And therefore, the power is going into the hands of the people. And therefore, the entire scenario is changing very, very strongly if you go into the rural areas. So coming back to your pinpointed question is that what is the consumption requirement, what is the need of the poor people or the rural people, it starts from entitlements. The need, which is the government entitlements, is the first most important thing that they need and they deserve, which they don't get it. The second is education, and the third is market and the job and the pricings and everything, which is business. But having said that, they don't get even the first one, and therefore since they don't get the first one, the second one becomes an issue, then the third one becomes an issue. I'll give you some of the examples. We are in about 150 locations all over the country in about 60 districts and 25 states. And all of them are backward districts, mostly tribal, minority and all that. And the way we work is that we establish a center with computers and IT and Wi-Fi and hotspots in a place which is driven by community, where the community can come and use that as a place where they can access information they need. Their children can do digital literacy so that they tomorrow, through the medium, they are not dependent on middlemen to get the access to the information, because there are many layers of information that floats. I know something, I can't get it. I know something, I can get it, but I don't, I don't get it. So there are many, many layers of information. So
these things, when you say they don't get something, is it because of the medium?
Control of the medium.
Okay.
Control of the medium.
So it's not because they don't know how to read, for instance, and everything is in text.
Of course, that is one of them, because the medium, if they need a scheme, let's say if I need a pension scheme, I just don't know how to fill the forms. I can't even read it, because the medium is something like that. But if it is orally explained to them or video-wise explained to them, then they can tell that where I can go and where, whom to rely and so on and so forth. Ultimately, of course, somebody will have to be required, but the dissemination of information has become much more democratic rather than dependent on singular person. So audio as a medium, video as a medium is becoming extremely, extremely prevalent in rural India, and people are coming back to them. As micro SD card is becoming a huge, huge popular access as medium of access for information or for entertainment. For watching films, for watching videos, and even when we make videos for dissemination of information, we make videos in such a way that can be shifted to the micro SD card, which the young kids can transfer from one location to the other, from one device to the other. A big display of video is a big attraction in the villages. Entertainment is the biggest deprivation in rural India. So even if you go, if you open a center, the first three things that they go for, the first three things they go for is YouTube, FB, and Google. Google also at the last, but the first thing, if the age group is under 30 or 25, the first thing they say is that I want to get onto FB. And WhatsApp is the medium on the go. So for example, we get all our reports from rural India centers on WhatsApp. There is a 2 case study that I wanted to share is that there are a bunch of about 10 centers we have in one district called Bara, which is close to Madhya Pradesh and next to Kota, where all Bhil and Saharia tribes access the center. And they have a mechanism of WhatsApp reporting. So they have almost like a full control over the local media. So all the centers, some unique story, they share on WhatsApp with all the local journalists, and they use that to publish in the newspaper. And today morning also, I got the clipping of the newspaper, which is printed after having transferred from WhatsApp to them and then got published. So I would say, photo publishing or image publishing is a phenomena that is coming up. Take a picture and send somewhere. Any form of publishing that takes place. You can't read and write, just attractive, or somebody says that this is what it is there. You take a picture and send with WhatsApp.
This is almost like peer-to-peer publishing.
Peer-to-peer publishing and even group publishing. Because the peer-to-peer publishing also, WhatsApp allows how many members in a group? 100. So you are literally printing a kind of report for 100 people on the go all the time, and it becomes, if 100 में से एक को transfer कर दिया दूसरे पे, then another 100, and it keeps on multiplying. So that's a very big thing. The second area of publishing, and I would say, is the folk music. Which was almost hidden on the subject of middlemen, is now there are a group of folk musicians, at least I know about 10 of them, which we have been working with. They have been able to create channels, and they are broadcasting their folk, and they are getting invitation to perform in different places. So they are no more dependent on, let's say, ICCR or so on and so forth. And it goes on. There are textile and design printing that is happening very heavily. Chanderi is an example where we have been working for 5 years, where weavers have learned how to design on computers, and then they are managing a full-fledged e-commerce, and which is like, I would say, e-commerce publishing is happening. They are maintaining and managing the entire thing. So they are going up to the market also.
Okay. So what you would say is that they are actually creating content themselves for themselves. Would you say that's true?
For themselves and for others also, I would say. I mean, people
Okay,
like us, we are becoming consumer of the products that we are not able to avail, and avail through various level of layers, is now we are directly getting in touch with them. So that's also true.
Okay. But when they create audio and video, that's largely meant for local consumption?
Yeah, so entertainment area, yes, local consumption, so it becomes viral locally even without letting you know. So they are watching all the big films and all that. In fact, when we open a center, the one hard disk will leave with all the films. YouTube, and which we usually encourage YouTube watching, is because it's not illegal. It's not pirated, because if YouTube is pirating, it's their headache. But as long as we are, if you are watching YouTube, it's fine. I mean, and YouTube, if you really go into the dictionary of YouTube, you will find hundreds and hundreds of Hindi films lying there in full, thing. And all our centers have got LCD projector, for sure. All of centers have got Wi-Fi and broadband. So many a times many people say that this is a better place than going to Delhi, where you don't get a good bandwidth. So, yeah.
Okay, I think in this context, I should relate a story that Osama had mentioned in one of his articles in Mint a couple of years ago, I think. So he said, he described his experience of talking to 2 18-year-old construction workers at a dhaba near Ranchi. And they were listening to music on their mobile phones, and Osama walked up to them and said, can I look at what's there on your mobile phones? And, it turned out that they had very interesting stuff. And just to give you background about them, they were earning about 7,000 rupees a month. They had Chinese-made smartphones, bought second or third hand for about 600 rupees. But as Osama had very, clearly observed, they had excellent speakers. Okay, they had a 4 GB micro SD card that had innumerable songs, videos, several full-length films and animations. So they get their SD cards filled at a local shop at the rate of about 40 per GB every time they go and get it filled. And if they get just one song, it may be 2 rupees a song, while a full-length film costs 5 to 10 rupees. and they spend anywhere between 1,000 to 1,600 rupees a month on their mobile and entertainment content. Okay, so it's about 15 to 20% of their income goes into mobile entertainment content. So there is real demand at the bottom of the spectrum. People are willing to pay for content. It may be pirated content, but if there is a genuine mechanism to get the content to people, then they would probably pay for it because they are already paying for it. And would such people actually pay to buy a book and read a book? I think I'll leave that for you to ponder over. And Sevanthi Nayanan, the media critic, had a very similar experience when she was researching media habits in rural India. And in Madhubani in Bihar, she said watching movies on the mobile is big. So if you have a more advanced phone, you go to a shop which puts a movie onto your phone memory, again for about 5 rupees a movie. So friends watch together, or a husband and wife watch entire movies on a handheld device. So a handheld device is their primary entertainment device. And especially for people like construction workers, they are itinerant workers moving from place to place. So they don't have a home where they have a TV where they can get a DTH connection or whatever. So this is the only way they can actually consume entertainment on the go. And as Osama pointed out, even in a village, entertainment is the first draw, and that's what they go for.
Actually, just to add, that becomes very popular also because that gives the teenager a chance to watch a movie alone without being in the community or with family, where he may not like to watch the movie. So I'm not going to comment on what kind of movie and all that, but there is an opportunity for them to watch a movie which they may not be able to watch. That's just as observation.
I'd like to ask Titash to actually tell us a bit about what he sees as the opportunities to create content which is going beyond text and exploiting the potential of audio and video.
Thanks, Satya. So first I would like to say that a lot of what I was going to talk about is already Osama has said it really well. No, don't be sorry. I mean, it's really heartening to see that I'm thinking on the right lines because I'm hardly an expert how you introduced me. So one of the things that I've started observing, and to give a brief background, I've been building my self-publishing product Themify for about 3 years now, and over a period of time, over this period, I've noticed a couple of things. One is that there is definitely a demand for videos more over. So the hierarchy is videos first and images second, and then web articles, because our platform allows people to curate all that content, and we observe user behavior. So what we've noticed is that people usually tend to turn off text filters and go for videos when they are curating content. The other thing that I have started noticing increasingly, and recently there was an article in TechCrunch, some may have read about it. It talked about that we are living now in the do it when you want, DIWIW economy. And it talked about Uber and all other on-demand services, and it was a US-focused thing. But I tend to sort of extrapolate that into publishing and link it back to what we're talking about, peer-to-peer publishing. So this do it on demand is not just about the consumers, it's also about the producers in the system. So if we take the Uber example, because it's a common example, I can choose to become a taxi driver if I have a commercial license as I turn the app on, and if I don't feel like, I can turn the app off and I can stop becoming a taxi driver. So I have the power now to choose to become a producer in the system when I want, and stop being a producer in the system when I don't want. The second, and this can be extrapolated to publishing as well. We can potentially talk of a platform which is peer-to-peer, where if I ask a question or I have a information need, I float it up. And if somebody else is in that point in the mood to answer that question or to produce that content, using a mobile device, they could produce that content. That could be a self-taken video of 30 seconds, or that could be a small image with a description, and then they could reply back. At the point that I don't feel like producing content and don't feel like being part of it, I can stop being a content publisher. And I am already experimenting around those lines and trying to understand if, and also because I work in education publishing, I'm trying to understand if 30-second videos created by just about anybody who's a subject matter expert, but not necessarily a teacher or an academician, can answer a student's question. And that can be a fellow student in the campus. So one of the schools that I go to, I've been asking this question to students, that if you are weak on a particular topic, would you prefer to go to a student in the campus to understand it? And that actually does happen. But it's not, it doesn't happen that often. So one of the things that I'm thinking is that if there were a system where I ask a question and then somebody who chooses to be the producer of that content. So that's another big trend that we will see. Probably somebody will build it or somebody will use existing systems and do that. It doesn't have to be a technology-driven system. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that it is a behavior-driven system. Existing technologies can be used to become create a peer-to-peer publishing system. You don't have to build something new for that. The other thing that I want to also touch about is the fact that mobile phones are changing the way we consume content, and we all know this, and we've been talking this all around. That brings up the whole discussion whether we really have in the a long future for reading as a thing, and earlier we were talking about that. And maybe reading as a form of learning and sharing information will go away in the future. Also because machines are becoming smarter, and therefore they will do the information crunching for us. They will do a lot of decision making for us, and therefore our lives will go to a form where information will come to us through auditory and visual modes only. Probably in another 10 years, the next generation would not read as well. And maybe that's not such a bad thing. I mean, we don't know that because it is appalling to us at this point, but 10 years later, it might not even be the need to read, because all the textual information can be consumed by a machine and parsed into either image or visual kind of things. On that note, I want to touch about a product that I came across recently. It's called Life Tape, and I think everybody should just go to that product and check it once, especially because what Life Tape does is it allows you to capture or upload audio, video, images, and then it automatically and intelligently creates a sort of a running narrative. So if you were to create a narrative about publishing next, and everybody took a lot of pictures, some people wrote some text, some people shared some articles, Life Tape, their algorithm is capable of intelligently merging them and creating a running narrative out of that. Now that's a beautiful form of production. What's the problem with them right now is that their interface is very difficult, so not many people can create them. But I see things like Life Tape as the future of content publishing, where there is really no difference between audio, video, and text. It's a seamlessly merged, and it's done by a machine, not by humans necessarily. So those are some of the things that I'm observing.
I think Titash made a very controversial statement, so I'd just like to get some feedback from the audience. So when he says that he can imagine a world with no text, no reading happening, how many of you can even imagine something like that? No, as in imagine it will turn out to be so. Imagine that there could be a situation in the not too distant future where we don't read. No, read. You don't read, period. I mean, you don't read text, whether in printed form or digital form. Mm-hmm.
And after going through the day, and we're back to technology, and we're back to that actually writing with paper and pencil created a wall of aggravation for a lot of people. And going back to the oral tradition is again democratizing. So I think technology is so disruptive and so unimaginable. Possibly we could be doing away with it
Yeah, actually, just imagine how the world was about 400 years ago. There was no reading, no writing, everything was oral, right? And because we wanted a way to communicate our ideas across space and time to people who are not in front of you, to people who would live 100 years from now, so we invented the alphabet and the mechanism of putting words onto a page in a medium that would remain available to people over time, to be able to have ideas travel over space and time. But now if you can actually do that in the way in which you did that, the natural way in which you did that for probably 99% of humanity's life on Earth, then maybe that's going back to basics in effect.
What about audio memory and written word memory? Because I find that at times to make things clearer, you have to put it down on paper to imprint it in your mind. So would that work? Because I think the audio and the video has got a shorter span of.
Yeah, I think this is a nice introduction to what Jyoti has to say in terms of her experience. So I think I will ask Jyoti to now tell us a bit about what she has been doing with SynTalk. For many of you, it may be a rerun, but then I think for the rest of us, it will really be a revelation.
Yeah, let me just be very clear. I don't think I'll answer your question. So please don't. I mean, at least her question. At least her question. But I would encourage you to definitely listen to some of our episodes, because some of the SynTalkers have tried to answer that question. And I mean, I don't know whether it's the way you design the panel discussion, but it's interesting that a lot of us are being forced to think beyond the conventional ways of publishing. And yes, the written word does come around, a couple of 100,000 years back, when there was a need to transfer knowledge or transfer content from one space-time to the other. And these are things which people with more experience in cognitive sciences, with linguistics, with semiotics, and cultural studies will have a lot more to say about. But now that Satya has handed the mic to me, I'll probably briefly describe what we are trying to do at SynTalk. And we are. I'm not sure where I fit into, where SynTalk fits into the framework that all of you individually have in mind, but let me give it an attempt. So we are a talk show, and talk show is probably we are in the guise of a talk show. We have a vision of building a platform for interdisciplinary thinking. We love the life of mind. We live the life of mind. So a couple of us got together and decided that we'll create a platform where SynTalkers, a certain kind of human beings, would come together from different disciplines. We'll put them in a room and they'll talk, and we'll record those conversations and make them available for anyone who's interested. So now what has that resulted into is we are now 39 episodes strong, and couple of thousand concepts have been touched upon, and there's still much more to discover. What the experience that we have envisioned before we started.
Just one quick question. Could you explain why you chose audio as the format?
Yes. So I was coming to that. So a couple of things that we envisioned before we started was we wanted to, as I said, capture thinking. And when we were looking at different modes of capturing thinking and making it available to last as long as, say, 100 years, we realized that one way to do is definitely to really write a smart app, stay on the edge of the technology, always keep on doing what the new technologies are coming up. Then we also looked at video, then we also looked at text, then we also looked at audio. So the audio format fitted very well with our vision of SynTalk. We believe audio is closest to thinking. We believe audio is playful because, we visualize SynTalk as a playful hour of slice of life of 3 or 4 SynTalkers. We believe it's unstructured. We believe it's subjective. And these were all attributes of SynTalk. So when somebody goes to, and whenever you get a chance, please go to syntalk.wordpress.com. If you listen to an episode, it's your experience with that episode. It's what you make out of that conversation. and what you think about it. So there's a lot of subjectivity around these conversations, right? Even now when 5 or 6 of us are speaking, each one of you is interpreting it in a very different way. And we wanted to translate that experience, and we just felt that audio was perfect for that. We believe audio ages better. It, it travels better. It's something, if you, that's another design decision we made, that if you invest in a good sound quality kind of an audio, it's more likely to last longer than a video. It doesn't have a space or time attached to it. So if you do a video, you capture in it not just the room and the ambience, but also the fashion style of that time, also the haircuts or the, everything of that time, even, how people look, because I don't know 100 years later how will we look. We don't even know that, but most likely the sound will travel. It might happen that language gets extinct, and on one of the episodes called Rise and Decline of Silence, we had a very well-known linguistic, Professor Ganesh Devi, and when we asked him what is the future of language, he said they're going to go extinct. Silence is going to rule the world. Coming out from a linguistic, that statement was like quite a statement for us to really absorb at that time. Going back to how audio also reflects thinking, there have been multiple moments in our experience so far when we had discussed with sin talkers what they would like to talk or what they would like to really say when they are in company of other sin talkers. But when you put 3 people or 4 people together and ask them to just think aloud, just think in the company of each other without an agenda, like we are an unscripted show. We don't start with a script. We don't edit anything. We don't stop the show anywhere. So it's 1 hour of everybody's life, uninterrupted, uploaded as is. So it's like, it's like completely unadulterated in that sense. We don't even cut a word here and there. Something else happens. So we start with an understanding of, okay, Professor X will say something, Dr. Y will say something, or Mr. Z will say something. But when they come together, because they are thinking in each other's company, something else happens. And that becomes sin talk. So if I call myself content producer in the terminology of the publishing industry, I would say that we are really spontaneous in our content. We are very playful in our content, and the way we are driving sin talk is with a very high focus only on the producer. So we only worry about the sin talker. Like, is he interested? Is she interested in coming on this episode? That's it. So if you ask me, how do you package or how do you market, we won't have an answer for that. And as a team, we have taken a decision to go this way for as long as we can, as long as we would like to run the show.
Okay. I think one of the things that you mentioned in your presentation earlier is sort of an answer to the question she had about text-based memory and audio memory. So you said when somebody reads something, they remember 5% of what they read most of the time. But when somebody listens to something, or when they are talking with somebody else, they remember the conversation, almost 75% of the conversation they're able to remember. So that I thought was interesting observation in the context of her question.
Written memory, not reading memory, written memory.
As in, what do you mean by written memory?
Writing down something to remember, not listening to it or seeing it.
So what you're saying, let me try and understand it better.
You mentioned audio memory
Mm-hmm.
and visual memory.
Mm.
What about memory which you get just by writing down on paper?
So when you write it, it registers in your mind. That's the memory you're talking about. Okay. Okay, so that's possible. I mean, I assumed what you were asking for was, when you read something, how it stays in your memory.
Yeah,
Okay.
can I respond to
Yeah,
your?
sure.
It's not a reply, but just ask the same question the person who has never written and never read. It's a cruel joke for them. I don't have an answer because I'm not a pedagogical or I don't know biology or anything. But for centuries and centuries, people have not written and they remembered. So I don't know whether what you are saying is the written, by writing you memorize it longer. Is it true or not?
Cave drawing and all that stuff, written memory. Aren't you putting it on
No, no, anything. It could be anything. But what I'm saying, many people do not. I mean, you know, horse memory. People say just go somewhere and they come back and they remember the, you know.
So I just want to add one more thing, and probably is going to be controversial, but I'm going to ask the question that why do we, as we progress in technology, do we even need to remember? We've started handing that over to machines. So
different argument and different conversation altogether. Yeah.
So that just reminded me of this science fiction show called Black Mirror. It's one of them is on YouTube about cameras being attached to their eyes and recording every moment, so they can always rewind and look back at it. This reminded me of that.
Okay. I think that's a good time anyway with the mic in your hand to come to you with a request to try and explain to us what you see happening in terms of the different experiments in video where YouTube as a platform is emerging as a dominant platform.
First, let me just give you a really sort of big picture statement on what's happening. We've moved into an era where supply of content is infinite, right? And audience is infinite. So I would actually contest about people reading less because I see people reading more. I think it's not, and let's not limit ourselves to just people reading books. Maybe the form factors changing, maybe how much they're reading at a particular time is changing, but people are consuming far more content than they were even 5 years ago. Not just metros. So for example, Airtel released a data point about a month ago on their earnings conference call that about 40% of the consumption on their mobile network of data is video. That's massive numbers of video being consumed, and a large amount of it is coming in the rural areas. Because there they have the bandwidth. In the metro, as you know, we don't have enough bandwidth to watch video on the mobile networks. So I think...
No, let me just quickly clarify. So you're saying people are reading more?
People are reading more, and they're watching more, and they're listening more, they're consuming more and more. And more people are coming onto the networks that are consuming so much more.
Okay.
So I don't think there's a problem that you have in terms of consumption. There's a problem that you have in terms of differentiation and capturing an audience and constantly ensuring that the audience is consuming your content because supply is infinite.
No, I'm talking about between text, audio and video.
I think they're consuming more of it, all of it.
All of it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at it, would you consider receiving a WhatsApp message a consumption of text? I would.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely. That's a good point. Very good point.
So we are consuming a lot more of everything. Nothing's dying out just yet.
No, it's not a question of dying out. I don't think anybody is trying to
or anything is going
die
down.
out, except
I mean,
for Titash's controversial statement.
Yeah.
But
no. Okay, I haven't read a news. I haven't maybe on flights, but I generally haven't read newspapers for the last 6-7 years, so I don't know. But I consume a lot more news than I would in a newspaper because it's all through the web. So I think what's happening is that the medium is changing, and so the problem that you have in terms of monetization is also that advertising is dying, because the primary mode of monetization with infinite supply and a lot of consumption has been advertising. On the 16th of September, Apple's coming out with a new version of the Safari browser in iOS 9. There's an update where ad blockers are being integrated into the browser, which means that people can switch off ads and not view your content or read your content without the ads. And I think for publishers across the globe, that is the scariest thing that's happening. And there's been a great deal of debate now about ad blockers because they've been around for a while. So if you look at ways of monetization, you either have transactions or you have advertising. Now what's happening on the transaction front is that you don't own the audience anymore. In that sense, there's no direct relationship between you and your audience. The platforms are taking over. So, I mean, one of the reasons why we are fighting that debate, that battle for net neutrality, is because the telecom operators are trying to insert themselves into a relationship between you and who's reading your website, or between you and whoever's between your website and whoever's coming to visit it if you're an e-commerce player. So there are these, so the pipes or the channels or the platforms are trying to insert themselves into that relationship between you and your direct user. Facebook's done it. If you have a Facebook fan page, if 2 years ago you used to do an update, now it goes out to only 3 or 10 or 15% of those users, because they control the platform. They've reduced your reach, and therefore now you have to spend in order to increase the reach of your content to those people. And it's the same thing that's happening across the board. If you look at, I think Google's one of the more neutral platforms right now, and Twitter also is, but there's a constant push to create barriers so that you have to pay them money to overcome those barriers. So, it's the same thing that, marketing is not in your control. So all platforms, and apologies to them, but this also includes Daily Hunt, they essentially exist to aggregate as many content creators as possible. So you are a part of their supply of content, and the user to get as many users as possible. And there's a bait and switch that takes place at some point in time, where instead of being paid, you'll have to start paying to get paid, in a sense. So I'm saying don't trust any platform anywhere. As a publisher, what you need to do is be everywhere and be aware of how each platform is evolving, and play the games with them the way they're going to play the games with you. It also helps quite often to sort of do that old political trick of threatening to leave and then getting a better deal from them. But I think the infinite supply is a big problem coming up.
But in this context, do you think publishers stand a chance against the bigger platforms over time? How do you see it playing out?
I think,
including in the context of, say, Amazon.
No, you can
and
never
book
win against a
publishers.
platform. The internet is about scale. It's about, and you can never, as a content creator, you can never get the kind of scale that you can. What you can do is make yourself indispensable to a particular community of readers and build those communities. So my hypothesis is that today there is more content consumption that's taking place on WhatsApp than any other platform anywhere. We're reading more, we are seeing more images, we're watching more videos. WhatsApp is the biggest media platform in this country today, and it's only going to grow. The only thing is they haven't opened up their API. So when the BBC launched their, during the elections last year, they launched a news service to reach the audience directly on WhatsApp.
But WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. So
WhatsApp is owned by Facebook, but so far they haven't done the bait and switch yet. Facebook has done the bait and switch. And Google's trying not to do it, but I think they will be forced to do it, because the battle between Facebook and Google and Apple and Amazon hasn't yet entered that game yet, but is about who owns the user. In the same way, the telecom operators are trying to come in because they want, so this is a phrase that telcos use all the time. As a customer of the telcos, they treat you as their audience. I've heard them use this phrase in TRAI discussions. So they want to then control what users access on the web, and that's where the net neutrality battle comes in. So I'm just don't want to keep bringing that in, but it's about who owns the platforms, and I think it's essential for everyone to be everywhere and play every platform against each other, because as long as they keep competing, you are relevant to them. It's like Flipkart's stopping ebooks, that means all your eggs are in the Amazon basket. You need Flipkart there to balance it out a bit, and you need every platform out there to balance it out a bit. I had a couple of notes that I sort of wanted to also share, some data points if anyone's interested. Video on YouTube YouTube is the only platform you have for video anymore. I think most of the other platforms, Facebook is trying to compete there, so content creators will have options, but even then YouTube is still the biggest. I think from the two view ads, from what we've gathered, people make about 4 to 5 rupees a view of a video. A true view ad is an ad which you can skip, but you choose not to skip. On the non-skippable video ads, you make about half a rupee to about 1 rupee per ad view. So these things operate on volumes and scale. The bigger you are, the more views you have, the easier it is for you to continuously make money because your content is always available. I think that problem of monetizing archival content has been addressed. I don't know if any of you have checked, but T-Series, for example, has got 6.5 billion views on their across 39 channels. No, total views. Right, and I'm sure most of them would have been monetized by T-Series. I think about a year ago, they were at about 2.5 billion. So they've added about 4 billion video views in the last 1 year because they have volume of content. They keep creating packages and putting them on YouTube. And they keep trying to, so again, it's a volume game. As a specialist, the way you look at monetizing video, for example, and I know Satya, I'm talking more about video because you wanted me to go on the talk about video, but as a specialist, there are two types of monetization that you can do. One is you can get branding for your video. So there are cookery shows, there are, my favorite example is this particular YouTube video called Disney Collector. I don't know, have any of you heard of that? Okay. So Disney Collector is a kids channel. It shows two hands opening up toys, boxes of toys. You've seen that, right? So they buy all the fancy toys and they unbox the toys, and that's all they do. They pick up the toy, they turn it around, they show it. Some of these videos have had over 1 million views each. There are kids who are addicted to this channel every time there's some. It's like I was asking a friend about why are kids interested in this. So they're like, for them it's a game. It's like you watch cricket. For you, that's entertainment. For them, they play with toys. So then someone else playing with toys is entertainment. It's like window shopping. But it still can't explain over 1 million views across the globe. And the monetization opportunities on video are across the world. So you can be a creator in India and you can get views. There's another kids channel called Choo Choo TV, which has got 29 million views for nursery rhymes. They pay a lot of money and get fancy animation done. All of this stuff gets viewed. So if you're concerned about the life cycle of your content, converting them into videos is a good idea. I think you might have to figure out how long you want to keep them because attention spans might be lower. But there are even people, at least, and IG would know this, there are sites which have startup founders in discussions about stuff, and those videos go on for an hour and people watch those videos. The thing about the web is, about YouTube in particular, is that a longer video may not necessarily make you more money. So you split it into smaller pieces and run ads on the beginning of each video. So I mean, there are ways and means of monetizing, but happy to talk more if you have any questions.
Can you also say a bit about audio? What your views are on audio?
So I listen to a lot of podcasts, and at least the monetization of audio from what I've seen are again, again, this applies for both video and audio. In video ads work a lot. So brands can basically, in case of a cookery show, they can ask you to use a particular type of atta, and then you'll show it on the screen and then use that. So that sort of monetization takes place. In case of personal grooming, this is a big segment: what type of nail polish, what type of hair color. So for example, Unilever spends extensively on things like this. In terms of audio, Serial, which you mentioned, was sponsored by MailChimp, and they became famous for making fun of their own name as MailKimp, I think it was. Yeah. So brands integrate. So they have. So the person who's narrating basically says a bit about the brand and how it helped, etc. So just the way it's on radio, you've got something called anchor mentions. Similarly on podcasts. So podcast basically taken over from has done the same thing that you've had radio do, and video is doing different things. So there are slides, there are brand integrations. So Snapdeal, for example, had a tie-up with AIB, where they'd done an Indian Super Mario sort of a video, and Snapdeal was integrated into the video for that. Again, AIB also does this show with Get It Infomedia, which has a brand called Ask Me, which is called Ask AIB, brought to you by Ask Me. So these are not necessarily endorsements. It's just brand integration into existing content. So Ask AIB is basically people leave questions on the Facebook page, on Twitter, on the YouTube page. They leave questions there, and these guys pick all the funny questions that they get, and then so they've also done live Ask AIB Live, which is a live streaming on YouTube, and they done it on Periscope, which is Twitter's live streaming service, and they got a maximum of, I think, 1,400 simultaneous viewers for Periscope. On channels, they get anything from the net utility video, which they had done with us, got about 3 to 4 million in all. The second video got a little less, but I mean there was no monetization there. But otherwise, video has the opportunity to scale. It's just about building that audience base and creating a direct relationship between you and your audience. That is the most essential part of at least the internet going forward. If you allow a Facebook or a Twitter or a Google or an Airtel, anybody to insert itself into into that relationship between you and your audience, you will be taken for a ride. You will be eaten up at some point in time. I don't think there's any future with that.
Thank you. And I think now is a good time to open up for questions. So can you just start with Prasna? Yeah, I'll come to you.
I had a quick comment on, you said Amazon is not getting between the users and the content providers. They actually are.
No, I know they are. I'm just saying that at least that's only in case of products and books, right? I was talking about the general instance of discovery of content, like.
No, actually, well.
Okay, you can correct me, but I'm just saying that Google and Facebook are there's far more. They're both communication or content discovery platforms, whereas Amazon is a retail platform.
No, but for authors like us, I self-published and I sell my books there, and they are getting in the way. What they want you to do is remain exclusive to them. So they used to have this select program. It's been around for a while, but now they have introduced something called Kindle Unlimited, and they want you to they're trying to force you to have your books in there, and people who have their books on there have higher visibility, so they have more sales. So they are getting in the way.
I'd love to have a longer conversation with you about this, because this is very interesting.
Sure.
I need more details on this. Yeah. Okay. Would you like to tell everyone about what's
Actually, I have we can do this on the panel tomorrow. I don't want to.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair.
So not actually a question, but just one example that I wanted to throw in, since there are so many authors and publishers in the room. I represent German Book Office New Delhi, so we work a lot with German publishers being represented in South Asia. There was a beautiful example that I came across where they integrated publishing together with marketing, together with video. They started a concept called 10 Pages. So it's a podcast and a YouTube video series running where the author, whenever there's a political topic or something which is in, so to say, in the news at that point of time, and an author they just pick up who's written some sort of book or some piece on that topic would read from that. Just 10 pages of that book. It's a very short video, doesn't take very long, and puts his comments, integrates his comments into a podcast. And that's accessible free, and that works very well because then it suddenly creates a marketing opportunity there.
What were the conversion rates on that?
I won't have the statistics,
Because
but
the
it's
thing
hugely popular.
So the problem with a lot of, like, for example, one of the reasons why we don't do video is because we don't see a sufficient enough ROI on both effort and time. And we'd rather do text because we get better return on investment. I think there's a lot of things that you can do, but where you get return on investment is most important.
Hi, I'm Sam Mohan. My question is for Mr. Osama. Hi. So, sir, I just want to know your opinion. If content is the queen, who is the better king for her? Is it digital or is it print?
I would say digital.
Why?
I think that's what we have spent 1 hour saying.
I want to know your opinion.
I also
your
said the
personal
same
opinion.
thing. Digital is becoming more democratic. It's audio visual. It's oral. Oral is a natural medium for instruction and dissemination and consumption of information. All you need is access to device, and that is also democratically available. This one piece of device is audio visual. It can function in the way you want. So that's the reason. You want to fire? Yeah, that's it will not end very soon. It will not end very soon.
Osama, can I just make a counterpoint? Here. This debate that comes up very often about print, about digital being democratic. I'm talking in the context of the Kindle and all those things. Now, India was reaching a stage where it suddenly became accessible for small languages, small publishers, small players to enter the print market. And all of a sudden, you brought in this new paradigm where we are struggling to cope with digital products, where we are uncertain about the market. Paper is very cheap. Printing is very cheap. It's accessible, it's democratic. All the values which you are ascribing to digital is already there in print here. And you're telling us to shift and run a new race.
Okay. No. Just this is only 2-sentence reply. One is
for big players, it's good.
Yeah. So number one, I am not telling anybody to shift. Number two, I never talked about print and all that. I talked about the medium of orality and the written. It's not about publishing and all. It's orality. So even if you make all the books available to all the kindergarten of the country, I mean, oral is a natural language. That's the reason I'm saying. There is no other reason. I'm still not convinced that, yes, book is not cheaper than mobile. Mobile is very expensive. Of course, it is very expensive. But the point is 1,000 can bring you millions of content. That one book in 1,000 rupees cannot be millions of content.
Yeah, and
that's also...
the other thing is also that, you say printing is cheap, paper is cheap. But then... okay, that's itself the first question. I mean, whether it's cheap or not. But even if you do assume it's cheap, distribution is very expensive. You can have printed books sitting in your warehouse and not being in the hands of readers. That is the most expensive thing, I would say. And that's broken, pretty much.
Satya, may I? Frederick, no one's forcing anyone to go digital except the audience. You have a choice whether you want to be where more and more people are going or not. No one's forcing anyone to go into one side or the other. You can't. Where the people are, you'll have to go there as a business.
No, it's an old debate actually. I mean, where supply versus demand, audience dictating content, etc. The danger is a dumbing down of content. And whatever content. I'm not talking about content in print or content in oral content, print content, etc. But if you start from the premise that, and that's to do with the fact that all independent publishers are risk takers, they create a demand for the products they make. And this kind of demand-led system goes against that foundational principle, for me. Yes, but I think the fun in creating content, I mean, otherwise we could all be self-publishing. Nobody needs to create content. You get what I mean? Why do you create content? Is publishing a neutral activity where that is in the neutral sense of the word, to publish, to make abroad, to disseminate. That is the neutral sense of the term. But is that all we are going to be talking about in this whole debate? Are we going one step further? Expressionism, expressivity is one thing that Jyoti talked about. That is creating content for me. Whereas if you say, listen, if your audience, if you don't give what your readers want, they're going to run away from you. That is the opposite of what publishing is about.
Have the choice of creating whatever you want, and if nobody wants to actually read or listen to that, then it remains so. I mean, that's exactly what Jyoti has been talking about. I mean, she says, I would let her explain that.
No, what Jyoti said is not what I have a problem with. It's what Nikhil said.
I know. So this, I think there are two separate debates, because one was around distribution, the other's around content, right? I'm distributing online because I've chosen versus print, and I feel there's a larger audience to target there. Even online, I've chosen my audience from the vast pool that exists, that I feel will consume the content I want to create, and they're doing that. So I don't think it's, I'm not, and you can ask anyone, we actually keep raising the bar in terms of the quality of the content in the market. There's no one who doubts that aspect. And there are people who are consuming that. It's a smaller base than many of the larger bases, because our thought process is that you have to go and define and capture a niche, because if you start playing the mass game, you're going to lose, because the bigger platforms will always win. So I think there's still a space even in digital. So two separate things. Content is separate, distribution is separate, the way I look at it.
Yeah, it's also more a comment rather than a question. I think there are many, many different issues here, and they somehow all get mixed up, which makes it very difficult for me to get a grasp. One is the question of the form that content takes. And I would say to that, you know, if I want to create a novel or read a novel, I will do just that. If I want to read a novel, I will not watch a movie. It can be that in a room, 90 people want to watch a movie and 5 people want to read a novel. But that still makes 5 people who want to read the novel. And if the platform is there to put up a text file, well, then that's fine, right? I simply think that an audio-visual film is something different than a novel, a written novel. It's just a different form of art. It's like comparing painting to singing. It's sometimes I want to hear a song, sometimes I want to look at a picture. So that is one thing. The type of content, if one talks about publishing, then becomes the question, okay, are we talking still about publishing, or are we actually talking about filmmaking or something else? That is the one thing. The other question is about information and the possibility to access information, etc. And I think there are a lot of other questions involved if we talk about writing and orality. I think, for example, I can get simple information far quicker in writing than in orality. I can't watch 5 videos simultaneously. I can simultaneously glance at the results Google gives me and see 10 results that tell me that the word I was searching for is a town in Canada, and I know it's a town in Canada. I don't watch a film on it, right? So these are simply different things. And in terms of information provision, yes, I have a platform where everyone can upload films. But at the same time, in news, for example, it is also important for me to verify what does the film show me, right? You have a riot going on, and community A and community B are killing each other. Community A uploads a video and says, this is community B killing us. And the same video comes up from other people, and they say, this is community A killing us. In news, always need somehow, or there will always be an authority that I look to that tells me, listen, this is verified, this is factual. If I don't have that authority, we saw what happened to Wikipedia. Wikipedia was originally completely open, and it didn't work because it was completely open, because there was no moderation. And that, yet again, will create power. Maybe different power than the 19th century power of writing, but it will still create power.
And now there's the power that's creating a problem. Yeah, that's happening.
Okay. Satya, when you say publisher, are you referring to a publisher of a periodical media or publishing house publisher in this? Are we all talking about media?
Okay. No, publisher is somebody who puts out, who expresses anything that they want others to read, listen, watch. Okay, so our notion of publisher today in this room might be book publisher. But if you go to somewhere else, in his previous, job, it would probably be a magazine. Or in his even earlier job, it might be a newspaper. Or for somebody else, it might be a TV channel or a radio program. So I would broadly look at publishing as somebody wanting to communicate to somebody else. So how can you do that? You can do that through different media. You can do that through text. You can do that through audio, through video, through personal interaction like we are doing right now. So there are various mechanisms to communicate. So which is the one that would become more dominant, not because somebody is controlling it and directing it to become dominant, but because that's what people feel comfortable with, whether on the consumption side or on the creation side. So that's the question. Today, for the last many years, for a few hundred years, it's been print as the medium, or the textual word as the medium, and reading as the consumption mechanism. Now, will that continue? Is what is open. It will certainly continue, but to what extent? Will it be as dominant as it has been in the past?
The first medium between the humans is picturizing the moment. They are picturizing on the rocks. Even before the oral, even before the texting, even before finding the language in written or oral, whatever it is. So now it becomes to the ancient. I mean, the text era is over. I mean, is coming to end, and the medium like video and the picture is getting more popular than the text. So it goes to actually the picturizing, viewing the picture and understanding. It's in our own blood, I think. So it will be more popular than the text. That's what I understand. So that's why the people, whether they are literate or illiterate, they can easily understand what they are observing.
Okay, so video didn't kill the radio star. I don't think there's any medium that's dying. All of them will exist simultaneously. It's about just about who's going to consume more of what and who's going to do more of what. I mean, the next frontier is clearly in the next 10 years. The next frontier is basically virtual reality, and we've seen some of it about 10 years ago. What is the site called? I've forgotten the name, but Second Life, right? So next frontier with Oculus Rift and all. So there are more and more tools coming in for VR, and we'll see that being commoditized, and that's another new medium which will come up. The newest medium before virtual reality is actually gaming. Gaming with its AI is very different from audio, video, text. It is the only actual interactive medium that exists today.